Welcome to Curious Life of a Childfree Woman, where we have conversations on culture, wellness, self-expression, and ideas to make the world better, all explored from a child-free perspective. I'm Emily Paulson. Let's get curious together. Spring break is not just for school kids. And after 70 consecutive weeks of Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman, we're taking a little spring break from recording new episodes to share some of our favorite conversations that feel especially timely in this season. And honestly, I think they deserve to be bumped back up to the top of your feed. So we're kicking off our spring break best of series with Mariah Humbert, an NYC-based etiquette expert and author featured often on the Today Show, in Forbes, The New Yorker, etc. Spring is typically the time when we start socializing more than we have been in January and February. I also have a lot of business networking stuff coming up, so this feels like the perfect time to revisit Mariah's tips on how to make interesting small talk, nail the perfect first impression, and just carry ourselves the way we want to, personally and professionally. Enjoy this revisit to my fun conversation with Mariah, and happy spring socializing. Let's start by understanding the history of etiquette. I think we hear this word and we might think old-fashioned, possibly outdated. I picture that cute little Tiffany's blue etiquette book that was kind of circulating in my generation in middle school and high school. But, we don't use the term that much today. But if somebody has really bad manners or really good manners, it doesn't matter what year it is, we definitely notice. So can you start by just sort of telling us, what is the history of etiquette? What does this word mean?
So if we want to go way, way, way back to where the word originated, it was, when Louis XIV was ruling France, and he would have these lavish parties at Versailles. And, he was very particular about how he liked to keep things, which I can appreciate. He really liked his garden kept a certain way. If you think of a French garden, they're, very well manicured, almost to look perfect. And so he started this kind of rule where you couldn't step on his garden. So you have all these people over, you weren't allowed to step on his gardens. And when he was verbally conveying that didn't work. So he put signs out, get off my grass kind of signs, and those still didn't work. And so he had the people in charge actually give out tickets to those who disrespected his rule. And those were called etiquettes. And so that's where the word originated from. Obviously, it has evolved significantly since those days, but it was originally kind of a way to know right from wrong. And it was very rule-based. But again, it has significantly evolved as our world has.
That is so interesting. It's almost like a demerit or something for stepping on the lawn.
Yes, exactly. And so it was, you followed the rule or you didn't follow the rule. And if you didn't follow the rule, there was going to be a repercussion for that.
I love that history. I'm already learning fun facts. And I also want to assure people that we're going to be talking about this in the modern world. I feel like that's what you do such a beautiful job of in your work and your content, helping us not feel stifled by some of these things that maybe started all the way back then, of course, but helping us really embrace this as a way to not just live intentionally, but interact with people in a way that feels really respectful and kind, I think. So tell me why you wanted to get into this work. Like, what intrigues you about etiquette to the point that you have become certified in this and that you've really built a career around it?
I originally studied etiquette because I was fascinated with the history, maybe not as far back as I just discussed, but more so the old Emily Post books from the 20s and the 30s, and just reading how people really lived a slower life and were very intentional in the way they communicated with people. And I was fascinated to learn all about that. But what really brought me to want to take this into a career is because I was searching for something to talk about that really engulfed all of my passions, living intentionally, helping people find the confidence that they need to shine their light, presenting yourself in a way that you're doing yourself the service that you deserve. And I took an etiquette course when I first moved to New York City. It was the first etiquette course that I took. I was not raised taking etiquette courses or anything like that. And I learned that the word was really misunderstood. And from my understanding, it was all of these rules. Everything was so rule-based and rigid. And I'm a rule follower. So for me, it resonated. But I thought to myself, it doesn't need to be so rule-based. Maybe if we looked at it as tools instead of rules, it would actually be something to empower people rather than the preconceived notion of that it's to, put people in a box, to make people act a certain way so that we're all the same. Where I like to use it for quite the opposite, to help everybody kind of bust out of their box and live with their truth, but with a roadmap to help you know what to do in different situations so you feel confident showing up as that best version of yourself.
We need a roadmap as much as I'm a rule follower too. So when somebody lays out, like, here are the steps, I tend to feel very safe in that sort of structure. But we also want to feel like we're being ourselves and we're being really authentic and we're letting our personality shine through and all of those things in social and professional settings. But I do feel like we need some type of guidelines, especially when you have good intentions. You don't want to offend. You don't want to do something that's going to hurt someone's feelings or do something wrong or that seems impolite. And then this is where the flurry of questions come up, right? Okay, well, then what
Right.
do we do? Like, what should we be focused on? What still counts? All these things that kind of come into our mind.
If we go back to really what etiquette is about at its core, it's about having respect and kindness for ourselves and others. It's about tapping into our social awareness and emotional intelligence so that when you are in any situation, you can say to yourself, how can I assert the best version of myself in consideration of others for this situation? So I'm a firm believer that etiquette is very situational. Yes, there are rules, like we said, to give us a roadmap, but we have to be able to think on our feet and pivot to do the best thing for each individual situation, right? Because the rules are there for us to follow as a guide, but sometimes we have to be flexible. And so if you think about the basics of common courtesy that sometimes in our fast-paced digital world we let go of, is that, old school feeling of communicating with people face to face and looking at people in the eyes and introducing people correctly and knowing how to speak about yourself and knowing what to do at the table. All of those things are still important. Obviously, again, we are in our modern world. We have to adapt to that. And etiquette rules from the 20s and 30s and 40s, some still apply, like, writing thank you notes. That's something that I still like to teach. But obviously, an etiquette book in the 1920s doesn't have anything about how to conduct yourself on social media or email etiquette or anything like that. But if we really go to the core of what it is, it's about being able to make someone feel valued in our presence.
I love that. That is beautiful. And that adds so much meaning to this work. Let's get down to brass tacks with how we actually do this because
Yeah.
you said the word digital. And I feel like this is where a lot of this gets lost. Like, we are addicted to our devices. I can certainly admit that I have that pull, that addiction as well.
Me too.
It's all of us, right? I don't know anybody who doesn't, or, every time we go around and talk about goals in a friend group, it's like, oh, I want to be on my phone less. I want to use social media less. It's a very complex topic. And you can really feel it when you're in a social setting these days or in a group environment. I was at an intimate gathering not too long ago, and there was a speaker, and just the amount of times that people would go to their phone, even in the middle of a rather intimate event, where the lights are low, people are getting it out to send a quick text, check an alert, take a picture of their food. Like, we're just so tied to our devices. It just takes you out of the moment when you notice someone else doing it. And then you think, should I check my phone? No, I don't want to check my phone. It's so weird. So tell us, like, what is digital etiquette?
I think our phones, or I know our phones, make us feel safe, right? When we feel uncomfortable in social situations, instead of facing those situations head on, especially for our fellow introverts, contrary to popular belief, I'm actually an introvert. People don't believe that, but I am. So it's safe for us to put our head in our phone because it's there. It's something for us to hold. It's a distraction. But instead, anytime you are interacting with someone, whether it be a quick interaction like ordering coffee at the counter at your local coffee shop, or being at an intimate gathering like you mentioned, our phone should be put away. Why? That way we can be fully present with the person or people that we're with, looking them in the eye, asking them questions. Again, sometimes it's uncomfortable in social situations for people, but you have to think about when you're in front of someone that the point of you being there is to build that relationship and to nurture that connection, and having your phone out actually hinders you from doing that because, again, it's like if I'm looking at my phone, I can kind of shut out what's going on around me. And so basic digital etiquette is just keep your phone away in those situations and know there's a time and a place for when to have them. One of my new friends, I saw her on social media write a comment to somebody that said, if you wouldn't take a book out and read it in that situation, should you have your phone out? And that's not something I'd ever considered until I read that comment. And Andrea, if you're listening, you'll know who I'm talking about. But She said, if you wouldn't take a book out in the situation, if you're sitting at a dinner party and you wouldn't take a book out to start reading, you likely shouldn't have your phone out either.
That's a great example. It's like a self-soothing mechanism. And I don't think we think of it that way. Like we think we're doing something important, like responding to somebody or checking an email or even gathering content, right? That's the other thing. You feel like, oh, I have to capture this so that I
Yeah.
can post it. But like, is it really being productive or is it actually just kind of doing that self-soothing?
And I think there's a time and a place too. We all want to take pictures and capture memories. And I'm not saying that you have to keep your phone away the entire time, but really that's where the social awareness taps in. Maybe when I first show up before anyone else arrives, I think, okay, I'll take a few videos and pictures while I'm here. And then as soon as everybody's here, this is when I'm putting my phone away and I'm being fully present. And, I do a lot of work on social media. So I think people are quick to think that I have my phone out all the time. And I actually am not on my phone. I really try not to be on my phone. When I take pictures, or post on social media, it's not in real time. I capture a couple photos in the moment and then my phone goes away. And there has been plenty of situations where I've been with people who do not work on social media and they're on their phone and posting in real time and editing photos while we're there together. I save that for when I get home and I'm in bed right before I go to sleep or in the morning while I'm having my tea. But I really try and be intentional. And I'm not perfect with it by any means. I could totally be putting my phone away more. But it's just important to know, okay, in this situation, what should I be doing with it? And you mentioned too a good point about you think you're doing something productive, like checking an email or something like that. But I think it's also how you communicate with the people around you. If you're expecting something important, let's say you're about to sit down for dinner, but you're waiting on a result from your doctor. I might say to the people I'm sitting with, you know what, I may get a call from my doctor. I may have to step out. Or I'm expecting a phone call from my mom who's landing, she's traveling. So I may have to just check my texts really quick to see if her plane landed. That way I'm communicating up front to really let them know of my intentions.
And even when you give those examples, it puts in perspective that most things we're checking on are not actually that urgent. It's
Yeah.
not a medical test. It's not somebody waiting, standing outside at the airport. It's just like, oh, my assistant had one more thing to share before she went to bed. Like, it's not as urgent as we convince ourselves that it is.
Yes, and it's not giving you the same connection as you would have with the person sitting right in front of you. And that's not to say I haven't made incredible connections online. I've met so many incredible people online, but I have a time to connect with them, right? And I don't want that to take away from the people who are right in front of me.
Do you notice a generational divide with this, especially in the digital world? Is it worse with younger generations?
I don't know if it's worse. I think we all have a problem with our phones. I think that with the younger generations, it's almost integrated as a part of their life. So to have the phone on the table during a meal, it's not necessarily they're trying to be rude. It's the fact that it's been a part of their life forever. Or maybe the older generations kind of have a little bit more of a boundary in that sense because it's something that came later in their life. But I think we all have a problem. I mean, I think about like my family across generations. Like we're all on our phone, no matter, my younger brother, my parents, we're all on our phone. So I don't think it's necessarily worse. I think it's just more comfortable and typical for the younger generations. It would almost be weird for them not to have it, I guess is what I'm trying to get at.
That's interesting. And I think you're right. Like the addiction, I mean, these devices are meant to be addictive. So it's not like, oh, if you're under 20, it really gets you. Like it affects
Right.
all of us. But yeah, maybe just some of those habits. It's like more time being alive in social settings without it. Maybe that like makes it a little bit more comfortable to leave it behind. I don't know.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about like, how can I be a better friend? How can I be a better partner? How can I be a better employee? And a lot of that comes from how present we are.
Yes, I want to talk about presence as a whole thing because I feel like you
Mhm.
can really help us with this. And I really like that example of like, would you bring out a book or, would you bring out something more elaborate? No, so you don't need your phone. How do you feel about people leaving their AirPods or like earbuds in all the time? Because I just did this. I will admit, I was out for a walk and I just stopped into the dry cleaner to drop something off. So I knew I was going to be in there for like 3 minutes and I left my AirPods in. And they weren't playing anything, but they were in
Mhm.
my ears. And then I walked out and thought, was that so rude? What do you think?
I went to the farmer's market a few months ago and there was somebody in front of me who had their headphones in and the person at the checkout counter was trying to communicate with them and they were on their phone. So they were having a full conversation on their phone while the person was trying to ask them like cash or card or whatever, or maybe just hello, how's your day been? And we just had a moment of both looking at each other like that was such a rude interaction. And so I guess my answer to this would be that it's best to take them out, even if it's a quick interaction. I think about myself, walking around New York City where I don't necessarily have like a large bag or a car. And it does take that extra moment of me like fumbling everything, try to take out one headphone at a time. But I really try to think to myself, like maybe this 2-second interaction might brighten their day for whatever reason. Even if I'm just saying, hello, how are you? There again, we move at such a rapid pace in our society, and especially me living in a city, it's like go, 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 go all the time. So if there are little, tiny little places in the day where I can slow down and take my headphones out, I want to, again, to just be respectful.
I love what you just said. It's important to me, like those human connections for the other person. I want to be respectful and have people feel seen and cared for, even if it is just buying a cup of coffee or dropping something off at the dry cleaner. But also they're very nourishing to me. I am an extrovert where you are an introvert. And I think it's nourishing for all of us, but I need the energy of other people throughout my day. And I live in Chicago, so a big city as well, but I work from home. I'm an entrepreneur. I work for myself. So when I really do take the 3 seconds to put my stupid headphones away, I feel a difference as the day goes on, like
really
those little eye contact things. I think it's so nourishing for us. And one of the things that I want to do more of is like these analog moments with people, but I'm finding it hard sometimes to even make that happen in a digital world. Like as an example, I love to send handwritten thank you cards. Spoiler alert, you will receive a handwritten for being on this show. That's really important to me. I think it's a nice personal touch. I enjoy writing them. I like the stationery, the whole thing. But I have the hardest time even getting people to give me their address. Like I feel like we've become so digital that some of these, when I'd like to send a little gift or a note or I don't know, like connect with somebody in real life, I feel like sometimes I'm shut down. Like people just don't respond to that. Or if I'll say, oh, like we could meet and do this in person, they'll say, oh, I'm so busy. Can we do it over Zoom? Like, what can we do to sort of encourage maybe just a little bit more like analog living, analog interaction with each other?
So to your thank you note point, something that I have found that works really well is instead of saying, could you send me your address, saying, what's your best mailing address? Right. That way you're sort of putting them in a position where they kind of have to give you an answer, right? If you say, could you send it? And they're like, I don't want to, rather than what that might help, it might not. But I think it does go back to those little moments, like you said, the thank you notes, the interacting with people. But I think when maybe it's not these specific moments, but if we think about the why behind them and really the power behind them. So I like to think about these like good deeds or kind deeds or whatever you want to call them as kind of a domino effect. So if I go and I take the moment to take my headphones out and I, speak to the barista at the coffee shop, and I'm not saying that I have this like magic touch that now his day is going to be, so much better. But my hope is that if I take the moment to be a little bit more kind or a little bit more intentional or send that thank you note, that it creates a domino effect. Like that person is now more likely to do something like that to someone else, which continues. So when you think about that tiny little small thing that you're doing, even if it feels as silly as taking your headphone out for a 3-minute interaction, you think about actually on a global scale what that's going to do, right? That's going to knock down a domino for the person that you talk to, and then they're going to be more likely, hopefully, will be encouraged by the interaction to do that in their own life too. And then you're just knocking down dominoes of more people doing good, kind, intentional things for others.
I want to be part of that ripple effect.
I know. I really, and you know what? And talking about it is such a good reminder for me too, because, I have to practice what I preach. And although I would say I'm pretty good about it, when you work for yourself, you're wearing a lot of hats, you're juggling a lot of things. There's a lot of plates flying in the air, and sometimes life gets really fast and you forget to slow down and do those things. And so it's great for me to talk about it too, as a reminder to be like, okay, Mariah, slow down a little bit. There's still room, no matter how busy you are, for these little micro moments.
It's all of us. We all have room for improvement. And it's also not lost on me that a lot of people are probably listening to us talk right now in their AirPods while they're running errands.
So true. It's so true. I mean, I go for like a walk almost every day. Well, not in the winter, but I try almost every day. And I have my headphones in the whole time. I'm listening to a podcast. I'm listening to an audiobook. And so I think it's great to have your headphones and I think it's great to take that time for yourself, but the time on the place. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk about actual social interactions. Like once we get past this digital screen and we're actually in person with people, I still feel like even though the pandemic in our minds is over, I still feel like there's this residual social anxiety. Maybe it was always there and just that social distancing era made us more aware of it. And maybe just coming back and kind of getting into the swing of things again with being around people. I feel like there's this struggle and this extra layer of intimidation or worry when we step into a party where we don't know people or a big networking event or whatever. So I thought maybe we could kind of walk through all the phases of a social event and you could help us.
Let's do it. So it first starts before you get there. There's a whole preparation piece that people don't think about. And again, it's because we move at rapid paces. It's as simple as sitting down for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever, in your Uber on the way there in your phone, to list a couple of things or a few things that are going on in your life right now. Because the problem is we, as people, we don't talk about ourselves very well. And we'll get into that once we actually get to the interaction. But to just note a few things, what are you working on? What are you looking forward to? It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It doesn't have to be this, a big life moment. It can be a show that you're enjoying or a book that you've read lately or the way that you're taking your coffee right now, whatever it is, a really great museum that you visited, something that you're looking forward to in the future, listing a few of those things so that by the time you get to the event, they're at the front of your mind now. You don't have to go reaching in your brain for responses for the questions that people ask. And so it's that, but it's also prepping your energy. Extroverted, introverted, a little bit of both. You want to make sure you prep your energy and you put your mind in the right place. Anytime I'm going into a networking event or a social interaction where I may not know many people or may not know anyone at all, there's been plenty of times where I've showed up to an event and I know nobody there. The one thing that I do is I think to myself, you never know, right? I always tell myself that you never know. You treat it kind of as like a sport or a game. Like I have an hour to accomplish my goal, which is to talk to as many people as I can, to meet people, to see how I can help them, to see how they can help me. You never know who you may meet. Some of my greatest opportunities that I've had in my professional career have come from networking events, from me showing up and being ready to talk. And again, for introverted people, this is not easy. So you do your little prep work, you get your mindset right, and then you go to the event. Something that happens is people will stand around the perimeter of the room and stand there frozen and take out their phone, right? We go back to that whole safety blanket thing. We want to scroll on our phones. It's more comfortable, it's easier to be on the outside, but that's not what you're there for. You can go home in an hour and scroll on your phone all night and go back into your, little safety cocoon, but really be there on a mission, right? Treat this seriously. And so when you're there, go to the center of the room, go up and introduce yourself to people. Everybody feels just as awkward as you do. Even the extroverted people, like Emily, you're an extrovert. Do you love going up and shaking strangers' hands, even as an extrovert?
No, I love it when people come to me.
Yes, exactly. And so now what you're doing by being the person initiating the interaction is you're kind of taking the stress off of everybody, right? You're kind of ripping the Band-Aid off. Everybody feels as awkward as you are, as you do. So just go shake somebody's hand in the center of the room. Aim to stand near the host. Why? Because if you are near the host and you're able to greet the host, and this is why I always say arrive to an event as close to the start time as possible, not early, but either on time or within the first few moments so that you can greet the host. Why? So that the host can connect you with the right person. This is where some of the biggest magic happens. It doesn't have to be a professional opportunity. It could be a new friend socially, but the host is likely to know who you will connect with best. And so if you can say hi to the host, let them see your face, a good host will say, oh, I know who I'd love you to meet. And then they take care of the introduction for you. And you already probably have something in common with that person. So that's the next step. It's kind of being by the host, getting to the center of the room. So we did the prep work, that. And then the third one is to have a good response for when someone says the magic words, tell me about yourself. Because we as humans freeze when we hear that. We're like, oh my gosh, how much information am I supposed to give up in this situation? Where do I start? Do they want to know where I was born? Right? Like, where do I start? And so I teach to answer 3 questions that you can tailor your response depending on if this is where you want to, step forward professionally, or this is only social and you don't really want to talk about your professional life, or a little merge of both. And that's to answer, where have you been? Where are you now? And where are you going? And so I would answer that if in a professional situation by saying, where have I been? I left my job in the fashion industry in 2021 to follow my dreams of teaching etiquette. That's where I've been. Where am I now? I travel all around the country for various speaking engagements to talk about all different topics on modern etiquette and how it could be used as a tool for empowerment and confidence. So where am I now? And where am I going? I'm looking forward to my next book coming out, whatever it is that it's coming up in the immediate future. So if you can answer those 3 questions, that's really helpful. And then I'll give one more tip about when you're having your conversations with people. And this could even go back to, the preparation step too. You want to have 1 or 2, what I call back pocket topics prepared. This way, if the conversation does not go kind of off naturally, or you've been asked a weird question, or you need to change the subject, whatever it is, you don't have to scramble for where you're going next. So much of thinking on your feet comes from being prepared, right? Some of it's a gut feeling, some of it's that social awareness, emotional intelligence, but a lot of it is how much you prepare. And so if you can think of, one of my easy ones, I love food. I love foodie. I love to talk about restaurants. And so my back pocket topic, if I'm in New York City with people who are also from New York City, I'll say something about a new restaurant that's opened, or you know what, I'm a big foodie. I'm always looking for restaurant recommendations. Where have you been lately? That's really great. And that's a back pocket topic for me. So it's not something I'm going to bring up first, but it's there for me in case I need to. So hopefully I didn't just throw out too much information at once, but hopefully it's helpful.
That was so helpful. I'm not taking notes because I'm so grateful that I will have access to this. I'm going to use it as like a course before I go to the next thing, because we all freeze when we get that question to talk about ourselves. And yeah, it's like you don't know where to go with it. And I feel like maybe we have a little bit more training for that in the professional world, but I find it even harder in the personal world. Or, when you're like, oh, this is going to be my one night where I'm not talking about work. And then someone inevitably says like, what do you do? Or, so just like,
oh, that's a great point that you just said that too, because that's one of the things in a social situation that I always tell people to stay away from. Don't start a conversation with, so what do you do? It's a little presumptuous. It's not really where you're able to totally connect with someone. You want to dig into their passions, how they know the host, where they're from, things like that. Obviously, if you're at a professional networking event, that's likely going to come up first,
Sure.
And so that's fine. And because we're in such a work-driven culture, it will naturally come up in the conversation. I advise people not to start with it.
That's really helpful. I don't like asking, and then half the time, depending on what they say, I can't go anywhere with that anyway.
Right.
If you're a nuclear physicist, I'll say that's the coolest thing I've ever heard, but I don't know, like how much am I going to be able to add to the
I can't relate to you. Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So, okay. And I like the idea. I definitely need to come up with my back pocket topics, because this also came up recently. Even as an extrovert who I think it's obvious I really love to talk, that doesn't mean that it's just always a fluid, natural thing.
Right.
I was in a situation socially with people who I was meeting for the first time, and it was sort of an acquaintance of an acquaintance. And, you end up kind of in a solo conversation.
Mhm.
And I'd gone through all the questions I could think of that were not work related, like what part of the city do you live in and what. And I just like hit a block. I did not know where to go from there, and I felt like I wasn't getting much in return. So I guess in those scenarios where you feel like, okay, I don't know what else to do in this little one-on-one interaction, do we just plan better to keep going, or do we gracefully exit and kind of mingle on? And then how do you do that?
So I would say that's really where you have to tap into your social awareness, and also think about the relationship that you're trying to develop with the person, of whether or not it's kind of worth both of your time to move on. A good rule of thumb with the back pocket topics is to make them something that you can talk about. So when the person then answers the question and turns it on you, you have more to add to the conversation in case you're kind of the one keeping it afloat. So for instance, I don't really know much about sports, so I'm not going to have my back pocket topic be about sports, because then when that person turns it on me, I will have nothing to add to the conversation. So that's just a point on that. But in terms of kind of knowing when to back off and how to do so, the issue that most people have with ending a conversation is that it's very abrupt, right? It's very abrupt. And so one thing that we want to do while we're kind of feeling that conversation not going in a great place is to overly engage before we disengage, meaning bring up something that you've already talked about, right? Like, oh, you know what? I really loved learning about your recent trip to Italy. Maybe ask one more question, or could you tell me more about this experience? Or maybe it's not even that you ask them another question. Maybe it's just sharing your sentiments on how much you enjoyed learning about it and what your favorite part of the conversation was. Now, the issue that most people have is that they use an open sentence instead of a closed sentence when they're trying to leave a conversation. So an open sentence looks like this. I'm so glad we had the chance to meet this evening. I'm going to go get some food. And then that person might either say, it's awkward, or they might say, oh, I'll grab food with you. And then now you're like stuck with this weird conversation that was already not going in a great place. So instead I might say, I'm so glad we had a chance to meet this evening. I'm going to grab something to eat, but I really hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. And I, look forward to catching up over email. If that's even something you want to do, it could just be, I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. It was so lovely to meet you. It could just end there. And so you close the sentence so they really don't have, and not everyone will get the hint. You will still have people follow you to the food or the restroom or wherever on your way to next. But just, really engaging before you disengage and then wrapping it up is kind of the way to gracefully remove yourself. And then another thing to keep in mind too is if you do know other people there, you can perhaps introduce them to somebody who you may think that they will connect with better. That way you're not leaving them standing there by themselves.
That last piece, that closed sentence, is definitely the missing link for me. I can't tell you how many times I've said, I'm going to grab a drink or run to the restroom. And then before you know it, you have a buddy with you the whole time, which, I mean, I'm grateful that anybody wants to talk to me, but when you have a specific goal, it could be hard. So that is super helpful.
Absolutely. And it also comes off a little bit less polished when you don't have like a full closing, when you're like, I'm going to go here. Instead of, it's so nice to meet you. I'm so glad we had a chance to talk. It's basically kind of summing everything up and showing that person, even if it wasn't the best conversation you ever had, it makes them feel like, okay, that person was really listening to me. We're closing out a good conversation. And it leaves it a little bit less awkward, I guess.
Is body language part of etiquette? Is that something you think about when we're in these social settings?
Absolutely. I talk a lot about body language. I like to approach etiquette from a psychology perspective. And if you understand the way that we are perceived by people, over 50% of the way that people perceive us is through our nonverbal behavior. And so we need to put emphasis on how we are communicating with our bodies. That way, not that we can control what people think of us, but so we could put our best foot forward, with understanding how people are receiving the information that we're communicating. And so it's not to say that the words that we choose aren't important. Of course they are. But you also want to think about what falls into that nonverbal category. So that's not only our body language, but it's what we're wearing, what our energy says, what our walk into a room says, things like that. That is really what impact people the most. We're so sensitive to energy as humans. And so it's, how does someone feel when they're around us? How does our whole presence affect them? If we can understand that, it empowers us to think about how we interact in social situations. And it also hopefully alleviates some of that anxiety of, did I say the right things? Did I say too much? Did I talk too much about myself? And things like that, which we all feel.
It feels supportive to think about how we are truly making an impact on other people. Going back to the beginning and taking our earbuds out when we're ordering a cup of coffee, or this and thinking about body language and the way that we are carrying ourselves and that presence that we bring into the room. I think sometimes when we over focus on that, it's from a place of self-consciousness and, like, oh, how do I look? How are they going to perceive me? Are they going to judge me? But if you can just step outside of yourself a little bit and think, no, like I want to have a specific type of presence and a warm energy and an inviting tone and a smile on my face and eye contact in service of others. That feels supportive to me and making it less about how I look and how people are going to think about me.
Yes, exactly. And so to answer your question, body language and etiquette absolutely go hand in hand.
Let's talk about presence. And I feel like we're sort of talking about that already. And I like that we're addressing social things because I feel like sometimes that's where etiquette is the hardest. But I also notice it in people, when you just, I guess professionally or otherwise, when you interact with someone and you're like, they just have such presence. Like they feel like they just command the room. They seem so cool, calm, and collected, whether it's an intimate cocktail party or they're up on a big stage. How does etiquette help us successfully have that presence even in these bigger situations? Like, is it all related to our self-confidence? Is it more prep work that's specific? Like, how can it support us?
I think a lot of it does come from confidence, but a lot of it too goes back to that psychology of understanding what does it mean to have presence, what does it mean to have charisma. And again, if you can think about somebody who you look up to and that they're, like you mentioned, they're the one that's always owning the energy in the room, and they're the ones that you're thinking like, how do they have all that confidence? And I would say a lot of it, if you think about first and lasting impressions, it really goes back to that. And so when we think about first impressions, we have 7 seconds to make a first impression. That's just the way our brains work, right? We don't mean to be so judgmental, but again, we need to make sure that the outside of us is a really good representation of all the incredible things we have to offer on the inside. So the issue that people have is they have so many incredible things to say and their knowledge and their personality, but they don't know necessarily how to show that non-verbally. And for people who don't have the chance to get to know them within 7 seconds, we need to think about how we're presenting ourselves and what message that gives. And so I like to think about like your first impression, you're walking into a room as like your movie trailer, right? You're going to watch the movie trailer likely before you watch a movie to see if it's something that you'd even be interested in. And so when I think about myself, this is my movie trailer when I walk into this room for people to decide, not necessarily, judging what they think about me, but wanting to know, like, how am I representing myself? Am I giving off something that says, oh, I really want to speak to this person. I really want to learn more about their story. And so it's kind of about really understanding that and having the confidence to know that you have the incredible things to offer, but ensure that you're allowing the outside of yourself to represent that.
That 7 second thing is scary. And I've heard that before. I talk about that a lot, even in brand work. And it's largely the same when people interact with our businesses or with our personal brand. But it's scary. I feel like sometimes the more I focus on trying to make a stellar first impression, the weirder I become.
Well, think about what you want to give off in your first impression, right? Something that's warm and inviting and a representation of who you are. And so sometimes that's as simple as eye contact and a smile to really show people that you're sincere, that you value their presence. And that's an etiquette thing too, or not a good thing to think about too, is not only is a first impression for ourselves, but we're also non-verbally conveying to the people we're meeting that we've cared enough about their time to put effort into the way that we present ourselves. So it kind of goes both ways. But I think you don't have to think about it so hard. It's 7 seconds, right? There's not much that you can do in 7 seconds. So even if you practice that, the tell me about yourself thing, ready to go with conversation, a true first impression is so quick that sometimes a smile and good posture and good eye contact to connect with people in the room is really what's going to help you succeed. Don't overthink it because it's so quick.
I like the movie trailer thing too, which, in my mind, we're extending beyond those initial 7 seconds, but it's still all part of that first impression. And that brings in this layer of authenticity to me too. And like, yes, we want to be doing these things for others and having presence that makes others feel good. And we want that approachability. But we also want to show up as ourselves, whether it is a work thing or a personal thing or what have you. I saw that did you recently go to lunch with Kate McKinnon to talk about
Yes, that was in September. So
okay.
a few months ago.
Okay. Well, I loved, that whole piece and
Did you have a chance to read it?
Yes, I did.
So fun. So fun.
And I understand, like, obviously she is, well, I've never met her, but she seems like a force of a personality and, so much humor, so much just individualism. And we look up to that. We want that. We all want to kind of have that personality presence. Not that we want to just copy Kate, but, whatever that means for us. So for those who have not read this piece yet, I encourage everyone to go find it. Was it New Yorker magazine?
New Yorker, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so everybody find this piece. But for those of us who haven't read it yet, how can we think about, like, I don't want to say checking these boxes, but incorporating everything that we've learned through this conversation, but also still keeping it really personal and authentic to who we are.
It's all in how you decide to tell your story, right? And I think that's really what it is. And so when I give people these etiquette tips, it's not to make everybody show up in the same way, right? And so when I tell people, to dress well, that looks different for everyone, right? Of course, for certain professional events, no matter who you are, I'd like you to not wear sweatpants, but whether you wear a suit or a fabulous dress or whatever it is that works to your personal style. And so that's the part that I really like to help people understand is how do you want to tell your story, and how can being yourself help other people feel valued and open up to be themselves too. And so that was a lot of the conversation that I had with Kate. And so we kind of ended, I won't spoil it, but we kind of ended with her saying, I don't really have great etiquette. I just end up being silly and doing, stupid things to make people laugh. And I said to her, isn't that kind of etiquette in its own sense, right? To make people feel valued in your presence. And if making people laugh is the way that you tell your story and the way that you can show up as yourself, isn't that kind of what I'm trying to get at here about making people feel valued in your presence? And she said yes. And then so I promised her I would do something super silly with her, which I'll let people read. I won't spoil it. But I did totally do something not authentic to myself. And that it was so fun. And we had such a great conversation. And I think, she was expecting me to be really, specific about afternoon tea etiquette and super technical, which I am, professionally trained in. And I'm happy to talk about the rules and the technicalities all day, every day. But the bigger part of my message is really what it goes back to and how it can really be a form of empowerment and connection.
So good. Oh my gosh. It's just like such a cool combination, the two of you, like not that you're complete opposites.
No, we are. And it was one of those emails that came through that I was like, what? Wait, what? This is how, what?
But what a great way to showcase how modern your approach to etiquette is and how it does everything that you just shared. It's about empowerment and confidence and seeing others and kindness and all of these fabulous things.
I really hope that that's how people, maybe they change their perception on it a little bit after they have a chance to listen to me ramble on about what it can do for people.
You're not rambling. It's all so good. Okay, so I was going to call these rapid fire, but they don't have to be rapid fire. I want your full answer. But I did ask my community for some questions. This part of the reason I wanted to do this episode is because I have had these questions myself and kind of navigating how this works. But I wanted to hear, is this just stuff that I can't figure out? Or is this stuff that more people are curious about? So I have a few questions, specific things, if it's okay for me to roll through.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Canceling social plans. What is the appropriate window, and does a text suffice?
This is where it's going to be super situational. Yes, you can. There's no real window because things happen, right? It could be, I canceled on you last time with only a couple hours notice, right? Because I asked Kelly, this thing was good enough. But it was, it depends on the situation. It also depends on your relationship with the person. So let's take ours, for example, right? That wasn't social plans, but I had to cancel on you. But I don't have the relationship where I can call you on the phone and talk to you about it. And so I sent you an email as soon as I knew that, something urgent had come up. And so in a social situation, you want to take into consideration your relationship with the person. And also, I think people feel the need to over-explain things on and on and on and on. And sometimes an explanation is warranted and you have that relationship with the person. But a simple phone call or text that says, something came up, I'm really upset about it, can we reschedule? But I would say in as much as you can for the window to be appropriate, try and think of what I would consider appropriate. It's so nuanced, right? Does the person have to travel to get to where you're going? Are these like a ticketed event that someone paid for? Or is this a, meeting for happy hour after work on a Friday? So think about the situation. Take that into consideration. Ask yourself, what is my relationship with the person? What is the event? What is my reasoning? And then how can I convey this?
Well, your correspondence with me was perfect. And maybe one day we will be on a text level.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, perfect answer. Host gifts. Alcohol used to be my go-to. I would bring a bottle of champagne or something, but I want to be more inclusive than that. So then I thought like candle, but scents, like people are very sensitive to scents. What are some sort of safe but thoughtful host gifts?
I generally say no to the alcohol thing unless it's someone you know very well and you are intentionally buying their favorite wine or champagne or whatever it is that they enjoy. And if that's the case, ensuring that you put it in a gift bag so that it's very obvious to the person. They don't have to feel obligated to serve it at that moment, that it's a gift for them to enjoy at a later time. But if you don't know the person very well, I would stay away from alcohol. So my favorite host gifts, I love cocktail napkins. I collect them for myself, and I think that they're a fun thing that not everyone buys for themselves. So if it's a bigger event, like something that I want to spend a little bit more on, like a housewarming or for a large holiday, I'll go on Etsy and buy linen, embroidered linen cocktail napkins that are either personalized or for the season. And then if it's, I don't want to spend a ton of money, I'll, go to a local store. Home Goods, TJ Maxx has great selection, and buy a cute paper cocktail napkin, put them in a cute bag with a little thank you note. And that's always a great gift that I go to. Another thing is something local. Like I love to go to the farmer's market and buy like local honey, or in the fall, they have like great apple butter, pumpkin butter, something like fun that they, an olive oil, something like that, or some type of stationery. So a journal, note cards, a notepad with a little pen. Those are my go-tos that are pretty neutral without getting into somebody's, interior taste or scent, as you mentioned, a specific scent that they enjoy. Again, unless you're best friends with this person and, my family knows that like rose is my favorite scent. So everyone will buy me like rose soap and rose candles. And I always welcome those because those are my favorite, but that's because they know it's my favorite.
Okay, perfect. Back to social media etiquette. What do we do if we get a crazy comment on something that we share? Do we just ignore it? Do we engage? Is it situational? What's the etiquette of not having someone feel ignored, even if what they commented was unkind?
I can unfortunately speak from experience. When I first started and my reels started really taking off, I was, holy cow, bombarded with the craziest, rudest comments. And in the beginning, I always say I teach people how to be kind, but like I am from New Jersey and I live in New York City. So I have a little bit of a spice in me that not a lot of people know about. So I
love it.
My first reaction is to want to, give them a piece of my mind. But I have learned over time, when it's social media and the person is not in front of you for you to handle it, my method now is to delete the comment and block them. If it is somebody that you know that did it, I think that you can still delete it if it's not something that you want. It's your profile, right? You get to control what energy is there. And if it's something that you need to address offline, in person, I would recommend doing that. But you do not need to feel obligated to reply to someone that is, insulting you or, crossing over a line that you don't want to cross or anything like that. So my method now is to block them, delete the comment, and wish them well in my head.
Perfect. I'm going to follow that. It's a whole new thing when you really start getting pointed comments that are clear. They're just there to be mean. It's navigating that is a whole new chapter.
It's so hard. It's taken me so much work to not take things super personally. And, again, it says a lot more about, I know this is so cliche, but it really does say a lot more about the person than it does you.
Absolutely. Who has the time to sit around and write negative stuff?
Right.
Like,
oh my gosh.
yeah, not worth it. Okay.
No.
Okay. Declining a party invitation. So you're not the one canceling, but what if this is well in advance and somebody invites you to an event and really you don't want to go just because you don't want to go? Is there a way to get out of this without lying and coming up with an excuse? Like, how do you just politely say no?
Absolutely. If you're doing it within the response time in a timely manner, there's absolutely nothing wrong. You shouldn't say yes to everything because then you can't be present at the things that you want to go to, And you don't need you don't owe an explanation to anybody about why you can't attend. So your response could be simple as, thank you so much for the invitation. Unfortunately, I will not be able to attend. I really hope that the event is a success. It can be as simple as that. Now, if you really can't attend, but you want to, your response can be, thank you for the invitation. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend due to a prior commitment. I hope the event is a great success and would love to, celebrate your birthday with you over lunch afterward, if that's what applies to the situation. But you don't owe anyone an explanation. And if you feel like you do, right, if it's like your best friend's birthday dinner and you're not available, you may say, I have a work commitment, I have whatever it is, if you feel that you need to, support that response.
Perfect. Grief etiquette. What do we say? And I'm going to ask this question because I'm sure we could have an entire discussion about this, and maybe one day we should. So I'm going to say, when you're at a funeral, and I'm not talking about like your best friend lost somebody or, somebody incredibly close, but when you're at a funeral, or if you just, somebody comes back from bereavement leave at work and that this thing has happened and you sort of feel like, do I address it? Like, what do I say? Do I just pretend like I don't know what happened? What can we say that's supportive without crying? What are your thoughts?
So I guess I should look at this in two separate ways, because I think that the funeral situation is different from someone maybe at work or socially who you'll see. So in terms of the funeral, we want to make sure that we're naming the person or the relationship, to the person. So instead of saying, I'm sorry for your loss, which is fine. That's not a bad thing to say, but I would perhaps say, I'm so sorry to hear of the loss of your dad, Tom, right? And then perhaps you might say a quick, right? It's not about you. So perhaps it's a quick sentiment about how they impacted you, or, he was such a wonderful man. I'm praying for your family. I'm thinking about your family, whatever, fits into what you like to say, but making it a little bit less generic without going into too much detail is kind of the nice balancing act. And then if you see someone who's recently lost someone, do not avoid the conversation just because you think that they don't want to talk about it. Again, let them lead, right? At least for you, say, I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your dad. I've been thinking about you. And then they may say, thank you so much. And that's kind of your cue that they don't want to talk about it. Or they might say, it's been a really hard few weeks. I appreciate you saying that. So you kind of let them lead, let them control which way they want the conversation to go, but always acknowledge it.
Okay, I like having them lead. And I think someone said to me once when, something was happening with a intense health thing, and I kind of confided them like, oh, I feel like I shouldn't bring it up. And they were like, well, is not bringing it up easier for them or easier for you? Like
100%. And I talked about this on social media. I think it was last summer, because someone asked that exact question. And so I always turn to my community too, to see this is, yes, I'm certified in etiquette, but these are real life situations where I want to hear from real life people who have, experienced this high level of grief. And I would say 90% of people agreed with me in that sense of, it's better to say something than nothing at all. But again, to be careful of what you say and then allow that person to dictate the conversation from there.
Thank you for answering all of my rapid fire questions. I just have one more question to close this. The point of this podcast is to help us think differently, live intentionally, but also really find fulfillment on our own terms. So I would love to ask you, what does a fulfilling life look like to you?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I think a fulfilling life for me, it really goes back to gratitude. I would say gratitude and living authentically are the two things that I think of when I think about a fulfilling life. So really, taking a moment to be grateful for everything that I have and the people that I love and that I get to do something that I love. And also, being fulfilled is knowing that I wake up every day and not only do something that I love, but live my truth. And so that's kind of what I consider fulfilling.
Mariah, for everybody who is just as obsessed with you as I am, wants to learn from you more, tell the people what you have going on and where the best place is to connect with you.
So the best place to connect with me, my website is www.ultaletiquette.com. I'm also everywhere on social media where you are, which is, speaking of being on our phones too much. So Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok are all Ultal Etiquette. My LinkedIn is my name, Mariah Grumet Humbert. And, what do I have going on? So I travel all the time to speak to various businesses. So I'm in the city, I'm out of the city a lot. I have a wedding etiquette book out. And then my second wedding, it's a wedding planner, but my second book will be published in September. So I'm working on that. And some other exciting things that I have in the works that I'm keep it quiet for right now, but exciting things going on.
I love the tease. We'll be on the edge of our seat to see when everything comes through.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you for having me, Emily. It's been so much fun.
If this conversation resonated with you, follow the show and leave a review so more cool child-free people can find us. I love meeting listeners, so also find me on Instagram at Curious Life of a Child-Free Woman, and let's keep the conversation going. It's not about comparison, it's about possibility.